Hiya, welcome to LSB Feasters Radio Channel, where we keep great radio from the past alive. Today we're going to New York in 1982 with 102.7 WNEW-FM. Now, it was one of New York's rock stations, but it did something very special on this broadcast. It paid tribute to 77 WABC just days after WABC dropped its music radio format and flipped to all talk. May 10th, 1982. That was the day the music died. And that was when Music Radio 77 dropped that popular music format after all those years to move towards the future as a talk station. WNEW did a 2-hour tribute, and it featured many WABC personalities, including Cousin Brucie, Bob Lewis, Herb Oscar Anderson, Chuck Leonard, and WNEW's own Scott Muni, who was program director. You'll hear longtime WABC program director Rick Sklar with some behind-the-scenes insight into the station. And it's a touching tribute for one radio station to basically honor another radio station. If you like it, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and feel free to subscribe to the channel too if you like. All right, here it is, part 1 of WNEW's tribute to Music Radio 77 WABC.
I'm Earl Bailey, and this is WNEW-FM in New York City at 102.7. We want everybody just to sit back now, if you can, if you're in the position, but turn the volume on the radio up nice and loud. If you're in the car, you're in the perfect place for it. You got to stay in your car for the next 2 hours. As NEW-FM salutes what's something, well, we thought would never go away. 77 Music Radio, WABC, has recently gone to all talk, and we just thought we should take a couple hours out because we're the kind of radio station that we are. We appreciate our roots, and a lot of the roots for NEW-FM and the music we're playing lies in Top 40 radio, the AM radio that a lot of us grew up with in the 50s and the 60s. So close your eyes, lean back, and here we go, NEW-FM.
Olympic gold medals already to his name. Your leader, BMR, the nuttiest in the New York church, on WMCA. Home of the good guys. You may be the winner of the musical love letters medals already to his name.
Tumble over there, but still nice.
Ring time now is 8 minutes after 12 o'clock, and that was Patrice's show. We're playing a lot of the oldies for you.
You're on your mark. 77 WABC.
No, yeah, get them behind.
And there always has been, and there's nothing we can do it.
Tonight, hear your top 12 favorites. The Daily Dozen has voted by you, our listeners, beginning at 7:15 on the new WABC Instant Sound Survey. At 8:15, the Scott Muni Show goes solid gold with the hits of yesterday. And then again at 9, more of your hits of the day, the voice of the people on the exciting and exclusive WABC Instant Sound Survey. Tune in Scotland Yard tonight and every night, 7:15 till 10 on WABC, one of America's great stations.
Scott Muni at 7:15. You be sure to be here when he plays the top 12, the Daily Dozen from the Instant Sound Survey on WABC, the swing-along sound of New York.
I think WNEW-FM has been, in the community, a station that has dealt with history of the music that we all enjoy and listen to today. In order to have the music we have today, we had to start somewhere, and that was yesterday. I think most of the people listening, who have been listening and following music through the years, our rock music, remember WABC, because that was a day in radio at its peak and its heyday where singles were the most popular thing that were happening. Groups and individuals who later became involved more in the music of today began selling single records. There were no concerts to speak of. Once in a while something might happen on a campus. But this is history, and I think to remember some of our roots is the whole idea behind this program.
WABC, serving New York and America with music in tempo with today.
All righty, let's do it the West. You and me, baby.
You latched on to Radio 70. week with Ragdoll here on your Dan Ingram Show.
What was going on was a change in technology. The same thing that originally made radio what it was. The radio is a creature of technology. When TV came along, a new technology, radio had to change. Conversely, when FM came along, and the government said FM has to have separate programming from AM, you can't duplicate, another technology came along, and this one was capable of presenting music in a far better way, in that it was in stereo, and you could get higher frequencies, you could pick them up, the receivers were of greater quality, and you didn't have the interference and the squeal and the static and the hum associated with AM radios. So there was a new and better way of presenting music.
In the golden days of WABC, Rick Sklar was program director.
So eventually, music would move over, and that's what really happened. Now, the fact that the year that the majority of the music audience shifted to FM, disco happened to be in vogue, was simply a coincidence. It could have been anything. Whatever music was in vogue the year that the technology shift took place, that would be prominent in people's heads as to, what finally superseded a WABC. But look, when WABC was up there, it was up there with 15, 20, 25 shares of the market. These little pipsqueaks that call themselves number one today with a 5 or 6 share, that's nothing. They're all chipping away a little bits. One guy's got a 7.6, another is 7.3, and then big deal. It's simply a fractionalized FM dial with a lot of people playing music. But disco didn't do WABC in. It was FM technology. And it didn't do it in. It really is forcing it to change. WABC will rise again, but now as a talk station.
Well, we got a couple of minutes left, Ron. It's come down to this, hasn't it? It's about a minute and a half.
This is the beginning, Dan. I mean,
it is the beginning.
It's the beginning for you and for Rick and me, and it's the beginning for Al and for Jay and everybody here with Talk Radio. So this is the beginning. This isn't the end.
Okay.
And that's the way I like to look at it. That's the way I've always thought about it. Dan Ingram and Ron Lundy. Our last WABC show. Sounds like a movie, doesn't it? The Last Picture Show or something? I had a good time today. I love you. Thank you so much for everything.
I love you too, Ron. My best friend in the whole world. It's been a lot of records over the turntables to make a very bad simile. There is one thing that I want to say that will be probably the last time. As a matter of fact, it will be the last time I will ever be able to say this on WABC. And the last thing I'm going to say is, this is WABC New York. I can't say that anymore, can I? But it's been a ball for almost 21 years for me, 17 years for you, Ron, for almost 22 years of this programming that's been on the station all this time. And we'd like to play just a couple of things to nail it down.
I remember sitting in the backyard on a nice summer day with my little 6-transistor radio tuned to WABC and listening to all the great music they used to play, like the Beach Boys and all those early sounds in the 60s. And I think that's what really got me tuned into rock and roll music. It was always WABC. And I really feel sorry that they went off the air, even though I hadn't listened to them in the last few years. I'm a pretty devoted listener to any WFM.
My memories are from when I was real young, and then also over the last few years. When I was a kid, we used to, in like 3rd and 4th grade, everybody used to bring in their radios to play WABC, all the Beatles and the Stones. And we used to all get our radios taken away from us. That's what I remember the most.
I'd like to thank WABC Radio for breaking in America's hardest rockin' band, playing songs like Walk This Way and Dream On when FM radio pushed them aside.
As far as the old ABC goes, I mean, it was Saturday night with Cousin Brucie all the time.
I graduated from high school in the 60s, the mid-60s, and I went to school out in Emporia, Kansas. We used to get a little homesick out there, and every once in a while we could get WABC over the radio in Kansas. And it would really help us out. It would help the homesick blues a little bit, per se.
The thing I remember the most about WABC was the jingle. I mean, aside from the music, it's just the constant you know, the call letters and the dong, you know, a little gong you hear every once in a while.
The Beatles, number 11, WABC Chive Time is 3:15 in your ring room. Great day, and it's sunny, warm, nice, beautiful. Temperatures in the 80s and 70s at the shore. Tonight, fair in the 60s in the city and the 50s in the suburbs. Ring-a-ding-a-cha-cha-cha. Variable cloudiness, warm and more humid tomorrow with a high in the 80s. And the outlook for Sunday, fair, seasonable temperatures and less humid. Looks like a great weekend. Right now, 82 WABC degrees. The world's largest outdoor saltwater pool is now open at Palisades Amusement Park, so come on over and dive in. 82 degrees in New York right now. Whoopee! All-American Radio in New York town. Big Dan Ingram on the go on 77 Radio. Yeah, little Mary Wells goodie for you. This is my guy. Hitline rated number 9. The super hit sound is WABC. 20 past 3.
Who could take me away from my God?
Tell no more. Ring Wells' bell, please. Thank you. It's 23 minutes past 3 o'clock on All-American Radio.
77 WABC.
82 degrees and gorgeous in New York town. You Dan Ingram. More music.
All-American Fix.
The Swinger by Jan and Dean. It's called The Little Old Lady from Pasadena. Isn't that what it is? It's
the Little Old Lady from Pasadena.
That's what I said, didn't I? Well, you know, sing it, Jan and Dean.
WFM. We'll continue our tribute to WABC Music Radio.
The change that took place at WABC from a mishmash of music, I mean, they had Martin Block on the air, and they also had Alan Freed on the air, so they were doing a number of different things, and they thought, let's collectively get all this together and make a, as they called it then, a pop music station, where all the music played throughout the day and night would be basically the same type of music. And so they hired Herb Oscar Anderson and myself.
Scott Muni.
And then eventually, in the next couple of weeks, brought in some top jockeys from other markets and brought them to WABC. That was Chuck Dunaway from the Southwest, Jack Carney from St. Louis, Farrell Smith from Cleveland, Charlie Greer from Akron, and Bill Owen was on the air then as part of the music team. He was a staff announcer at ABC at the time. And so that became the Swingin' 7 at 77. And those are the postcards and pictures that floated around town for so long of various New York locations, Penn Station and Park Avenue, where I was on the motor scooter, and we all wore those raincoats, those sexy jobs and symbols that kind of it got everything together, and it started that way. And of course there were changes. Eventually Dan Ingram came in, and then Cousin Bruce Morrow came in, and there were a few changes in and out, but basically we remained the same for quite a while and really set a pattern for what we were going to call a pop rock radio station in New York. And of course that's what happened. It was not an immediate success. It was a year or two before we had even a modicum of success. I guess it was too new and too different, but it came, and it came when it started to move. It moved rapidly, but it didn't move at first. And I guess word of mouth wasn't as popular then. And the other thing is, a lot of people didn't listen to radio for their music. They went out and bought their music because there hadn't been any radio playing that kind of music. So if you were going to go buy records like that, you had to go to a record shop and buy them.
WABC became a phenomenon, became a lifestyle for one reason, because when they turned the radio on, they not only had the music, but they had their friend.
Cousin Brucie, Bruce Morrow.
Dan Ingram and their friend Dan, Kemosabe. Their cousin Brucie was on the radio. These are the people they leaned on. Scotzo. I mean, come on. The M&M boys. That's what they used to call us, right? Muni and Morrow. Right, yeah. The Shirelles even did a song. Let Scott sing it for you one day if he dares. We became their family, their mishpucha. We were, Cousin Brucie was there. The kids would run away, they'd call me. Somebody was in trouble, they'd call Scott. They'd ask Dan for advice. We do commercials in our own styles. This was a thing that when the agency started giving us commercials, they'd say, hey, let Brucie do his own, let Ingram do his own. We want their credibility on the air. We developed a huge credibility with the audience because they knew that we cared and we were their friends. We were sharing their problems and their happinesses, and we were giving something besides the music.
Well, you had the element of show business. You had the element of personality, which a lot of radio stations don't let their announcers get into nowadays. You know, it's all...
Which I think is very wrong. What is happening to radio, which to me is the most intimate, lovely, sexy of all mediums, mass media, radio. You go to bed with it, sex with it, you have showers with it, you go to the bathroom with it, you're in your car with it. You know, these are things I've been saying for years, and they're letting it go down the tubes. All right, everybody's talking about fractionalization. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If Station A wants to play music for people and appeal to people in red sweaters, Station B wants to appeal to people in blue sweaters, Station C is for people in jockey shorts, that's great. But nobody can tell me that the kind of radio that we perfected at WABC with Scott Muni and Brucie and Dan Ingram and Ron and all those guys, there's no room for it. Baloney. I still do these things every day. I work 7 days a week to this day on my radio station. I have 4 radio stations now. When I make appearances, I'm still at McDonald's. Last week I was at the Hudson Valley Mall up in Kingston, New York. Thousands of people there. Hey, Brucie, how's your family? How old is DJ now? These are thousands of people. These are the same people. You see what I'm worried about? I'm worried about the people that are making the decisions are forgetting a very important market, the market that grew up with the Cousin Brucies and Scotties and Dan Ingrams, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60-year-olds. What about them? Sure, it's fine to serve the 18s, 19s, and 20-year-olds. Nothing wrong with that. But I insist there is room for radio the way I love radio, the way I do it.
Hello again. Here's my best to you.
Herb Oscar Anderson, known to all of us as HOA, got us up every morning and off to school.
Are your skies all gray? I hope they're blue. Good morning, everybody. This is Herb Oscar. It's going to be a beautiful day, and may you have a beautiful day and be a big part of it. And I'm so glad that you tuned in WABC. So glad that we could be together, and thank you so very much. I was at WABC twice. The first time I was there was with Martin Block and a whole bunch of people, and that really wasn't a success. And I left WABC and went over to WMCA in a kind of a huff. And then I came back to WABC when it started Top 40. Actually, we more or less knew what we were going to be doing with the original WABC, but it seemed that management never was quite willing to let us go along. So we went over to WMCA and really started to move that. And then, of course, when Hal Neal came in and Rick Sklar came into WABC, then I went back, and I guess the rest is history. This is going to be a little strange because this really stands out in my mind to show you the impact that we had on the community at the time. I used to drive down West Side Highway at about, anywhere from around 5 to 6 in the morning, and I had a telephone in the car, and so Murray Barber was my director, and if I was running late, I'd start the show while I was in the car and just started on the phone, say, good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm running a little bit late, but I'm on West Side Highway, and I'll be in the studio in just a second. In those mornings that I would be exceeding the speed limit on West Side Highway, and usually on the telephone because I was running late, a police car pulled me over right at the 79th Street Marina. And without even thinking, I just opened the door and waved my hand back to him and said, it's okay, fellas, it's Herb Oscar. With that, I closed the door and sped off again to look in my rearview mirror, and I saw 2 cops talking to each other like, you think this guy is for real? And I just kept going, and they just stood there. Now, I don't know if they just thought maybe I knew something that they didn't know, but just to show you the impact that the station was having, I didn't have a second thought about it. WABC was really an institution because I always had a saying that to the director and to the personnel that I was in. And the one side that I would really like to mention about the station and its great heyday was that it was a real friend to the people. And this is the thing that I kind of miss today. I listen to radio, and I want somebody to be friendly. I don't want someone just to call out records. Anybody can buy records and play records, and you always get down in a management dispute of who plays more records, or we'll give you a 2-fer or a 3-fer, as we used to call it. But more than that, and this is the one thing that I'm repeatedly asked, especially down in Florida, when they found out I lived in a particular area, was that it was a real friend. You could tune in the station, and you really felt as though you were listening to a friend. And we purposely set out on that course because the one thing that New York, up until that time, had avoided was the average person. Everybody was broadcasting to Madison Avenue and the advertising agencies, and the one thing that WABC was able to do was to solidify a huge empire simply on the basis of, hey, look, we're not great, we're doing the best we can, but we want to be your friend. And very few people in radio today have that ability to be able to really consolidate all of their efforts into one thing. Tune into us. We like you. We hope you like us. We're not the greatest in the world, nor do we pretend to be. But with that kind of a course, we didn't have to be.
News when it happens on WABC AM and FM New York. 77 WABC.
Yeah, Big Dan back again. Thank you, Doug. We got music for you. That's the music.
77 WABC. With a hotline of hits.
Today, this song is super hit number 5. WABC chime time is 25 minutes in front of 4 o'clock at your Dan Ingram playing rhythm.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody swing.
Swing with music from the super hits. 77 WABC. Palisades has the rides, Palisades has the fun. Come on over. Shows some dancing are free, so's the parking, so gee. Come on over. Palisades from coast to coast, where a dime buys the most. Palisades amusement park, swing all day after dark. Ride the coaster, get cool in the waves, in the pool, you'll have fun. So come on over.
Hey, the world's largest outdoor saltwater pool is open right now. You ride the world's highest Swiss sky ride and enjoy the fabulous new Showboat Funhouse with 35 attractions for one low price at Palisades Amusement Park. And tomorrow and Sunday at 2 p.m., see Johnny and the Sherwoods. And Sunday at noon, see the big Hootenanny Show with no extra charge at Palisades Amusement Park. And a big extra, this Sunday, you'll see Billy J. Kramer. Oh, it's a lovely day in New York town.
In New York City, we entertain you. So plan your weekend with music and us.
Hi there, Kimosabe. This is Big Dan Ingram, reminding you that everything you want to hear this weekend is at 77 on your radio dial. The Hotline of Hits. All the great music from the WABC Super Hit Survey, introduced by the All-Americans of radio, Herb Oscar Anderson, Bob Dayton, Scott Muni, Cousin Bruce Morrow, Charlie Greer, Bob Lewis, and yours truly, Dan Ingram.
The hairy one with the big feet.
Plus, news as it happens, weather before it happens, all the late sports scores, road reports of traffic conditions, and our expanded coastal reports for all skippers out there. WABC is such great listening. Tune 77 Radio every Saturday and Sunday all summer long. Remember, the weekend swing too on 77 Radio WABC.
Your weekend fun never ends on Saturday, Sunday. WABC.
The number one sound in New York, baby. Do you love me? You know it. Dave Clark 5, number 20. Oh, do you love me? The Dave Clark 5, the Dan Ingram Show on All-American Radio. 82 degrees right now in New York town.
All American plays a hit line. Super hit music, WABC.
We did jingles, and we had some jingles made, but promotion, for some reason, was lacking. Things that worked later on and obviously became big successes were, when the Beatles came along, we had a Beatles fan club, but before that, the Principal of the Year happened to be a thing that no one thought would work too well, but it became such a challenge to all the different schools that the mail became early right on through to the ending where we had to stop because moving vans pulled up one time and there were 3 million votes for a principal at a school in New Jersey, and it took 2 moving vans to bring all those cards in, and so it got a little out of hand. We used to go around to the schools that won and speak and make an appearance at the school before the student body and give the principal an award, the Principal of the Year award. And it's interesting how some schools were so proud of their principal. And other schools, of course, would get no mail from at all. But the popularity of some of the principals is just incredible. And so we'd go out and make those appearances, and it was fun. I think probably the first promotional thing that I personally did to call people's attention to the station and the show was to go out and do record hops. Now, record hops actually was the first form of concert for rock musicians in that you'd go out to a hall at a church or at a school and have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people all dancing to records that you played. But as a special for that particular night, the Shangri-Las would come in person, and they would lip-sync their record up on the stage or do a couple of songs. And somebody else would come to another one, and somebody else would come to another one. And so in that form, it was a chance for them to see the artists that they were buying the record from, but also for that artist to sell more of those records the next day. But it was the first real concert form for the rock people, and then the college campuses started to have early on some little concerts of a group, or vocal, maybe they called it hootenanny and so forth, but didn't do concerts. There weren't theaters to do it. There wasn't anything really in the form of live entertainment. And so I think people, when they wanted to hear their favorites, they had to go buy that album and then imagine what they did.
This is a great story. We were, Ingram, Dan was there. He joined WABC 1 month before I did. Scott was there, and this is kind of an interesting story. We all got into a room with Hal Neal. It was a terrific guy. He was a Marine sergeant to me. You know,
and he was what to WABC?
He was our vice president and general manager. He was the big gun. And we were not. Don't forget, we were not in Fat City at WABC at this time. We had listeners, and it was still very teenage radio. And WMCA was doing it. WMGM was doing it. You know, everybody was playing around. WNEW, they were still in 1940. You know what I'm saying? And they had not discovered there was FM was just duplicating what they were doing on AM, which we won't even discuss. I'm sure you'll let it. I know you'll let it. Anyway, Hal Neal got us into a studio one day, and I remember Scotzo was there, and Herb Oscar, and Danny, and myself, and he said, the first one of you guys who become number one in the next ratings will get $150 cash and a suit of clothing. All right? And that was all he had to say. We all got together, and the next book came out. We were number one. WABC was born, and we were up and running. And he gave everybody, all of us, $150 and took us all down to a place called Phil Kronfeld on Broadway in Manhattan, and bought us a suit of clothing. We all got those famous raincoats that we used to appear in pictures. The All-Americans, but the All-Americans weren't born in those days. We were the good guys, by the way, before we became the All-Americans. Are you aware of that?
It was WABC? Before WMCA?
Yes. Yeah. We kept it for about a week and a half. And then we became the All-Americans, because they put a lot of money into it, and WABC, I guess, was not willing to cover the expense of that.
What were some of the phrases? The All-American Hit Survey, right?
Yeah. The Super Hit Survey, the Super Sound Survey, listen to the All-Americans, you know, this type of thing. And they became the good guys that put out the sweatshirts, and the battle was on. It was a great thing. It was terrific. New York was fun. The good guys were against the All-Americans. The All-Americans really, it never caught on. The good guys caught on, and to this day is a phenomenal
thing. They had the T-shirts
and everything. WABC, we had it first. We were the good guys before they were.
That's a piece of history I haven't heard yet, with all the history that's been going by us in the last 3 days.
And we then became number one, and we held on. I mean, we were getting 20 shares, 30 shares, 40 shares of the audience, and to the people listening, that's a very big hunk of the pie.
This is early mid-'60s.
Yeah, very early mid-'60s. It's just, we captured, and in those days, we were really a young people's radio station, because rock and roll, which it was, rock and roll music, as Jack O'Brien used to call me, the king of rot and roll. Rock and roll music was not accepted by the adult world. They poo-pooed it, you know. As I said, they must feed him, they say they must feed Cousin Brucie 5 times a day and put him in a closet and then let him out at night. This type of so it was not chic, it was not in to listen to Cousin Brucie and to WABCs or WMCAs in those days. And of course, FM radio was not even there. They were not. Nobody realized the great potential of this other medium, FM radio. So we just banded along, and everything on the radio in those days were pimple creams. I mean, I became the king of pimple creams, you know. Hey, everybody, listen, you want to get rid of your pimples? Why not use Blebitina Go-Go? Guaranteed to get rid of your pimples in 3 days, or your money and pimples back. You know, I sold a lot of pimple creams and toothpaste and a lot of soft drinks and chewing gums and those kind of things. That's all. And remember, we had National Home School of Study. We used to get them equivalency diplomas. That was our commercials in those days. And then the turnaround happened when I have to credit the Chubby Checker phenomenon, the twist, for bringing adulthood to our kind of radio. Suddenly, the twist came out, and suddenly twist clubs, like in New York City, you had the Peppermint Lounge, and all the other clubs that were dying, needing a shtick, needing something, became twist clubs. And adults started going to twist clubs, and that started them listening to Cousin Brucie's and Dan Ingram's and WABC type of radio all over the nation. And so that was really the big change. That's what started. Then we had to defend it. We had to continue. being adulterating the radio station. And that's when the trouble started.
71 WABC degrees in Channel 77 in New York town. This is the station that wished on New York and became a star. WABC. Got a solid gold hit for you by the Sparkle Tones called Black Slacks. Black slacks, black slacks, black slacks are filled with tacks. Ding-a-ding-a-ding-ding, a-ding-ding-ding. Everybody go. Thank you.
A tribute to WABC from WNEW-FM.
Oh, gee, I was...
continue.
Whoops. I'm sorry, Earl. I was really hoping we'd hear that one. But anyway, we will continue, as Earl Bailey said, with our tribute to WABC Musicradio at WNEW-FM in New York at 10 o'clock.
Well, the program director would bring in a group of records for us to listen to, and we would vote on which ones we wanted to play. Now, we didn't have a lot of choice. It was whatever was brought in that we listened to that we had a choice to add. And so, actually, WABC at its peak, and even after I left there, had narrowed their playlist of current singles to a very low number, somewhere between 18 and 22 or 23, depending on the records that were available. And those records were rotated all the time. In other words, in 1 hour you'd play 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and 11, and the next hour you'd play 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, and it got to be boring to me. I mean, some of the records were good and some of them were great and all that sort of thing, but there was so much new music starting to emerge, and there was this whole rebirth of people involved in writing and recording, and it was so valuable to get to all these new people that were coming along, and we weren't doing it. But of course, the nature of the station was to play the hits, so the newer things weren't of concern to management. They were to some of the air people. And so there was a neglect in that area. And, of course, once FM emerged and came into its own, the birth of all the music we have today really grew. I mean, then the expansion. But thinking back, the groups that were hits in the early and middle and mainstay days of ABC in the 60s were the same groups that we had to work with. They were mainly vocal. Musicianship didn't come along till later, till more of this birth and freedom happened, where you get up on stage and not only you play these songs, but you show musicianship. Here's a guy that can really handle the keyboard. Here's a fantastic guitarist. You know, that sort of thing. That came later, but all the records that you used to listen to then were all, if everybody wasn't singing, you're in a lot of trouble.
I had befriended a bunch of kids, Bob Lewis, alias Babaloo, a doo-wop group, before I was in a period when I wasn't on the air. I was working I was a graduate student, and I was working in a YMCA youth program. And I befriended a bunch of kids who had a doo-wop group. They put out a record almost a year later while I was working in New Haven, which wasn't a particularly good record, but it wasn't a bad record. And they came up to New Haven to do some promotion for their thing. And they came up a couple of times, and then they walked in one day and they sang this song to me. This Babaloo, Babaloo, I-A thing. I hadn't even heard the record it was taken from, which was a 1958 million record seller by a group called the Eternals. And I flipped on the theme song. I said, this is a lot of fun. I stuck them in a production studio at the radio station, recorded it, and started using it. And the result was that people started calling me Babaloo. It was just a take on Bob Lewis. When I got to New York radio, my first boss in New York was Rick Sklar, not at ABC, but at what was then WMGM and is now WHN, and it was a rocker at that time. I took over a show from Al Lohman Jr., which was, in fact, the Peter Tripp show. Al Lohman had taken it over from Peter Tripp, and I took it over from Al. And it was the 8 to 11 slot or something like that. It was opposite Scott and Brucie and, I guess, Steve O'Brien. I finally won an argument with Sklar to let me use it. I used it a few times and got contacted by the Eternals. And I thought they were going to get mad because I was using their record. And they said, no, we want to record the theme for you the right way. So we went into a studio and recorded it, and I used it. And it was the theme song that attached the name to me.
Yeah, 37 WABC degrees, and it's cloudy in our town, downtown New York town. Date, if you need it, Wednesday, 17th of February, 1965. Right now, again, 37 and cloudy. All aboard. Hit that whistle.
Wednesday landslide set in the die variable people bracer for the pass, letting the time slide roll.
The one that I probably was best known for was the All Night Show, which I did when I first came there from WINS. I did that for about 2 years. And I left the All Night Show. Originally, I had expected to move off the All Night Show into an earlier slot. And unfortunately, I was too successful. We had a land developer client who apparently was so happy about the amount of land sales that I made for him that he insisted that I had to do the show so he could sell his land. And it got to the point where I'd rather not mention the name of the client, but it got to the point where I could barely mention my name without having the name of the client thrown at me. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, I enjoyed doing his commercials because they were completely ad-lib commercials. I insisted that he fly me down to see the land before I would do the spots because I didn't want to sell swamp or something like that. I don't think an outfit like ABC would have allowed that anyway. But I wanted to know what I was selling. And then I ad-libbed his commercials twice a half hour. And they apparently worked very well, so he really wanted me on there. And so I got stuck there for about 2 years, and it had totally destroyed my personal life. And I finally said, look, fellas, I really want off this show. And they finally accommodated me and shifted me over to first weekends, and then I had a late-night show after Bruce and before the all-night show for a while. And that was about the time that I kind of revolted and within myself and laid Babalu to rest and decided that it was time to be Bob Lewis and play progressive rock. I went to what is now WPLJ. It was WABC FM at that point. I was very involved in the programming of the progressive rock that put ABC FM on the air because nobody knew anything about progressive rock at ABC. Anything. I liked it. I'd been listening to it myself for a long time, and I kind of doubled for a while. I was doing Babalu on ABC AM and Bob Lewis on FM, and the station finally became concerned that my being on both radio stations was confusing the ratings. So they threw a curve at me and told me I had to work on one station or the other, and I think I blew their minds and took FM. And as a matter of fact, somebody, I will not say who, said to me, how can you work for a little FM radio? Yeah, this is very appropriate for what we're talking about. The question was asked of me by one of the management. How can you go to work for a little FM radio station that can't be heard more than 60 or 80 miles from New York City and choose that over a radio station that you get mail from Honolulu? And we used to get mail from Honolulu. That station, when they're skipped, can be heard there. He said, how can you turn that down? Turn down the biggest radio station in the world? And I said, because FM is tomorrow. And I think that ABC Going All Talk is proof that for my kind of radio, for music radio, FM was tomorrow. It is today. I can remember in the 50s and 60s, we used to have local hits. When I worked in New Haven, there were hit records in New Haven that didn't make it in New York. And there used to be a thing about if a record was going to make it, it would make it first in Buffalo. But making it in Buffalo didn't guarantee that it would make it. And the point that I'm trying to make there is that FM permits local hits. FM permits local interest. And I think local radio is 10 times better for music and personal entertainment than any large area coverage radio station. I like the fact that WNEW-FM is a New York radio station. They've got very good FM radio stations in South Jersey that come out of some of the universities and so forth. Pete Fornatal came out of one of them. And it allows for more people to get involved in the music because of the limited range of the radio stations. Whereas the talk format is really ideal for a huge coverage station like ABC. And stations like ABC, the clear channel stations that can be heard over most of the country, these are mastodons. They are out of date in terms of their original reason for existing. They created these radio stations, the government created these frequencies, these clear channel frequencies originally, so that rural areas could get big city news and big city entertainment. Well, with the advent of wire services, rural areas get the same news that big cities get. And with the advent of the recording industry, they can get the same entertainment that the big cities can get. There is no real reason for clear channel stations today. Okay? So we may as well use the ones we have for talk and information. Okay? And I think that ABC is an outfit that's uniquely suited for that kind of situation. They have such a huge news operation, such a tremendous reach around the world that they can bring information in. I have not looked at what the talk format's going to be on ABC. If it's just chatter, then I think it's only a matter of time before they change it again. But that's a personal opinion. If they do get involved in really serving the public with topics and discussion and information that can be carried in words, I think that's fine. Because you know, in the 70s, stations like WNEW-FM were carrying a social message as well as a musical message. We were playing music that talked about the way people felt politically and the way people felt emotionally about what was going on in the world. There was very little Moon, June, Spoon, and I Love You, okay, that was there, but the records were concerned about real happenings in the world. I mean, can you imagine somebody making a disco record about the Falklands? You know, Don't Mess With Me, Argentina, or something like that. I don't know. It's just not today's music to talk about that kind of thing. And somebody's got to talk about it, and I guess it's up to the talk stations. When I left, ABC was about 1970, and I put in about a year at CBS FM, and then I came here. So that'd be about 1971, and off and on, I was with NEW until about 75 or thereabouts.
This is WNEW-FM, New York City.